Hi, Julian here with a brief overview of the colour studies, giving you some examples of student work and then looking at how they've been able to take those colour studies into their design thinking, and finally looking at some examples of architects who work with colour during the design process. To begin with, a couple of examples of students who've looked at textiles. These are from the V&A, their textiles collection, and they involve really very close examination of the textiles, looking at the colours of the threads, breaking those down into a series of colour blocks which approximate to the size of the colours being used in the fragment, and also looking at the adjacency of colours. So, for example, at the top here we have the yellow and the ochre brown colour in the centre. So, beginning to think creatively about how those colours might work together. Another example here, looking at the intensity of the hues of purples and reds, and also looking at the amount of black contained in different parts of the sample. This example is from the festival hall. It's the limestone, part of the limestone cladding in the interior. Again, a small part of the sample has been taken and looked at, and we really get a sense of the range of different colours that are identified, lime greens through to blacks. An example of a painting. So here an example of a painting from the National Gallery, and the student has identified the blocks within the painting. On the left we have the sort of schema of the different elements taken. We have a postcard of the painting, and the blocks on the right hand page approximate to the fragments, to the elements that have been picked out. Note carefully the use of the sheet, so lots of space given, very carefully composed sheet, giving space to be able to think about the individual elements in isolation. So lots of space to think around and into and on from the fragments that have been taken from the painting. This example and the one after it look at fragments found on a site that a student was working on. Here we have a fragment of green glass that's picked someone's attention, and they're looking at the different hues within that, from a light sort of light bluish green right through to almost a black colour. And a very humble one, card wrapping, a heat-proof card wrapping for a drink, a cup, looking at the two types of brown, the pigmented brown and the board brown of the underlying material. And some examples from architecture. Here we have an example of a study from the Golden Lane estate, a listed estate near the City of London by Chamberlain Powell, built in the 1950s. So we have lots of applied colour in this estate, applied enamelled glass and painted timber painted framing. So the bright scarlet of the timber framing around the doors and windows, and then this large enamelled glass colouring. Again, look at the way in which the student has laid out the sheets. They've taken things, they've observed things, they've represented them again. They've given lots of space around those representations, space to be able to think, to be able to imagine different contexts for that study. Here's an example from the river, the examination of a red brick building in the distance in the context of the river and the colours of the greys of the river. The first page and a follow-up page, abstracting that information to create a series of coloured bands. Again, look at the layout, look at the way in which those things, they become, if you like, something in themselves, create a set of possibilities for future experimentation. Some more examples from paintings. Here we have a kind of a colour study of a painting, looking at the painting as a whole. So it's looking at the adjacency of different colours. So then we have, again, a range of possibilities that we could take forward into new design thinking. Look, for example, at the colour on the bottom left of the cello, the light timber colour set in this very dark blue-black context. So here we have lots of possibilities of colours that are working together or creating interesting possibilities. A couple of pages here from a particular painting with lots of colour studies arising from them. So a rich couple of pages, breaking down again the different colours at work in the painting, in different parts of the painting separately. And final example, back to the river, looking at the blues, the greys and greens of the river in the context of the footbridge, the aluminium and steel footbridge. So a range of coloured tones that work well together. And again, look at the way in which the page has been set up. The colour studies unfold from context, and they provide us with possibilities to take forward into new creative steps. And finally, some examples of architects working with colour. Here we've got Carlo Scarpa. It's a study, a drawing, an early drawing for a project called the Castelvecchio in Verona. This was a commission to convert an old castle, which had also been a barracks and a prison and so on, into a museum for the city. The work involved stripping away and revealing the history of the building, the different uses of the building over time, in addition to adding a new use in the form of a museum and art gallery for a set of artefacts. So Carlo Scarpa works on board, cutting away at the board, revealing the underlying layers. He also adds tracing paper and paper and so on to the board, and of course colour. So we've got coloured pencil study of the brick, looking at the glazing in the old window openings, also cutting into the brick by making new openings, and again using colour to define those. And we've also got timber boarding of the doorways at the bottom left. So a layered drawing using colour to assist an understanding of form. This example is from Le Corbusier. Early on in his career, it's a villa for a wealthy couple in the outskirts of Paris. And interestingly, we have here the use of white. So we can see on the faded sort of yellowing of the tracing paper, we can see the white pigment of, I think it's a crayon, white crayon being used. So we have colour being used again to define form, and those blocks of colour being very important in that image. And an example later on from his career, this is a colour study for the gates of the Parliament building at Chandigarh. Chandigarh was a new city built after the partition of India, and Corbusier was invited to design the major buildings, the assembly buildings, the court, the Parliament building, the Secretariat building, the bureaucracy building of the city. And this colour study is for the monumental door that opens up at the beginning of the parliamentary session. So on the left-hand side, we can see the completed example. They're enamelled panels that make up the door, which pivots on a central rod. For the colour study, he uses a range of pre-painted sheets of paper. So he's already done colour studies for the city, for the colours of the city. And here he's using cut fragments of those to compose the design for the door. And he also uses applied colour as well. This example is a drawing from Peter Salter. And interestingly, colour here is used to define and locate the drawing. This rather flighty structure defines and locates it as being, if you like, anchored in the ground. So the use of the brown here is a sort of a reminder of where the building has come from in the drawing. And finally, we have an example of a colour study being used very directly in the design of a facade. This is work by Saarbrück and Hutton architects from Berlin, and the work began by making a series of colour studies from the study through microscopes of the pharmaceuticals that the company, who were the client, produce. And from that we have a series of colour studies which are then used to inform the cladding panels that make up the facade of the building. So there we have two photographs of the completed form. Hope you find that useful, and look forward to seeing your colour studies and looking at ways in which we can bring those colour studies and that work into your design process. Thank you.